Hey, podcast listeners. This podcast is brought to you by Pineview Insurance Group. When I sold my company, I wasn't really sure what I should be doing. I started buying a rental property. I started buying a car, and I didn't really know what I needed to do from an insurance standpoint. But that stuff is very, very important. Me and a lot of my founder friends, after selling a business, we have no idea what we should be doing insurance-wise, and that's where Pineview Insurance Group comes in. So after selling his insurance company for $435 million, Mike Lloyd started this new company. I highly recommend it. It really does an audit on your assets and tells you what you should be investing in terms of insurance. So this is everything from your auto, your home, your umbrella policy, and much, much more. So if you guys are curious about working with an insurance group that's geared towards entrepreneurs, I recommend Pineview. You can get access to Pineview's new member waitlist at pvig.com/made-it. Again, that's pvig.com/made-it. Cheers, guys.
Welcome to Made It with Connor Tompkins.
Hey everyone, I'm here with Miles Lasater. He is the CEO and founder of Purpose Built. He also has started multiple different companies, one of them going through an IPO in 2010. So I really am excited to introduce Miles about some of the things that he's excited about building inside his venture studio and talking about a few things that come next. So Miles, good to have you on the podcast.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm looking forward to hearing more about your background. Can you share a little bit around HireOne and how that got going?
I was a student at the time when we started HireOne in college, and people assume it was with college buddies, but we actually had built things together before the Yale Entrepreneurial Society and business plan competition at Yale. So we were encouraging other people to start businesses and decided we had a good team with overlapping strengths and weaknesses. So we built a business ourselves, starting with a problem that we were closer to as students in distributing financial aid and helping universities automate their payment flows.
It's hard to think about starting a business so young, but it's a great opportunity because you have all the resources available and you don't have a family that you have to support at that moment for a lot of people in college. Is that what you found too?
For sure. I like the Paul Graham essay about the advantages of poverty and naivete, and he lists some others that students have. And while you don't have the social capital, you don't have the financial capital necessarily, you do have a low personal burn rate, you may have lower opportunity costs, and you don't know what you don't know. And you really need to work hard and just figure it out. And I remember early days of HireOne, there were points where we weren't sure what to do, but we just came in, got together in the office, and did something. In fact, one weekend, we were so frustrated and unsure what to do, we just started painting.
You started painting?
Yeah, it was a Saturday. We were like, we're going to be together. We don't know how to move this business forward. We're just going to be doing other projects. But it actually turned out to help because through that sense of bonding and like shared frustration and just working through that energy, we were able to get back to it.
How did you get the company to scale to over 1,000 different campuses? That seems like a lot for a group of students.
Certainly, one step at a time, right? We started by talking with customers, figuring out what they wanted, university CFOs and officials. Our initial hypothesis about the product was really rooted in our student experience, and we didn't understand what schools needed. So through talking with them, that we were able to uncover that. And that's how you build real product market fit. We also hired experts in sales, people with connections in the industry that helped us. And we also hired a CEO. So we had this strange experience of hiring my own boss, maybe a year or two into the venture. Again, because we knew we were handling lots of money, a high trust environment for universities, and they would want an experienced person, not someone who looked like one of their students to rely on.
How did you make that realization? That's not an easy thing to do.
It was pretty obvious when we called on these university CFOs that they were uncomfortable meeting, with the young 20-somethings. We were very committed to making the business successful. So for us, it wasn't a way of giving up or somehow like a negative. For us, it was, okay, what do we need? One of the things we need is a CEO. Let's go hire one, right? Like we need money. Let's go raise money. We need customers. We need employees, etc. Whatever it was, it's like another thing on the list. Obviously, it had to be someone that you could work with. That we were believed in and a strong working relationship with. But for us, it wasn't something we viewed as negative.
Did you pick the right person?
Yes. In fact, just texting with him today, we worked together for, 10 years and still invest together, still go on trips together. So we were just planning another personal retreat to get together with the executive team from HireOne.
I think it's incredibly fortunate that you picked the right person. Like, I can't imagine there's so many different ways that can go. And just because you hire someone that's experienced doesn't always mean that it's going to work out. A lot of times it doesn't work out. So
for sure, we were very lucky. We actually hired boutique search firm, and I think he did a good job. He had an insight into our founding team. We also intentionally didn't wine and dine. So we tried to make things very realistic to what early stage startups are like. I remember very intentionally choosing to walk the 6 or 7 blocks to the Thai buffet that we went to, all you can eat, for back then was like $5 or $6.
And that's your meal for the day.
Yeah, that was like the meal for the day. And it was also like, okay, this is your second round interview. Like, here's your fancy meal you're kind of having with us. You have to walk to, kind of thing. Because we wanted it to be real. Like, this is what we're doing. This is what we're building. You're not going to have an assistant for, maybe years. And resources are going to be focused on the business, not on our own comfort. Things like that, I think, made a difference.
What was your role kind of going into this next phase? How did you handle that transition?
So I was COO, later president, and then I was chairman of the public company. My responsibilities did grow and shift over time as we had different needs. One of my co-founders left the business after 8 years, so I started taking over some of his responsibilities. Dean, who was CEO for about 10 years, left as well, and my co-founder became CEO, and I was chairman. So in some ways, it was almost co-CEO, although we didn't talk about it that way because, technically I was his boss and he was my boss, kind of thing, and which is kind of circular. But we had a good working relationship. And I think, to your point, you're honing in on people as being a really key ingredient to a successful business. I think we're able to scale because we had a strong foundation in our team. And then luck was part of it, but also we're very careful about selecting people who could mesh with that team and help us build a great company. And we had really long tenure for that senior executive team, which I think makes all the difference in the world.
To provide some context to listeners, this company ended up serving over 2 million college students, hit around 200 million plus in revenue, and had over 750 employees. And it was listed publicly on the New York Stock Exchange. So you guys grew it to a pretty tremendous size.
Yeah. So it became a real business, nice reoccurring revenue. Multiple business lines. We ended up with 4 physical offices, and for the time in the aughts, we were early to be doing work from home. So we had hundreds of work from home employees, mainly service and sales, but it was still unusual. People thought, can you really get high quality work done that way? And now everyone sees it. But back then it was more pioneering.
With this business, Miles, how did the unit economics work? How was the company able to make money and scale so rapidly?
So we had low customer acquisition costs. We also had low per customer revenue. So it had to be high volume. We offered checking accounts to college students. And in general, it was about $4 a month in fees. That would like foreign ATM transaction fees, or we also earned money from interchange. So when people use their card to spend at merchants, a percentage of that came back to us. We also had other types of products that were sold more SaaS, charged to the university as software products, and then some that were transaction-based. When people would make tuition payments, there could be convenience fees charged for those payments on the web. So with a number of business lines, the unit economics were a little different in each one. But I'd say the big driver for the business was the banking business, which was, really high volume, focusing on self-service ability to keep those accounts profitable on, really small amounts of money.
What do you think are some of the bigger milestones or some of the bigger almost like junctions that you went through scaling a business from point A to point B?
Yeah, in terms of the product side and sort of how do you get the infrastructure to do that, it was an earlier time. Fintech wasn't a word. There weren't these banking as service providers that make it easier to issue cards as it is today. So we were kind of rolling our own. We pursued our own bank charter, but we never actually got one. We were approved through the state of Connecticut and got hung up in the FDIC because what we were doing was new, and a focused, narrow bank like that wasn't necessarily something they were looking for. There were a number of steps, like we were starting a bank. We actually hired someone who had experience starting a bank before. He helped us understand it. My approach personally is to read a ton when I'm learning about a new subject. So I just sat down and read the regs, read like, how do you apply for a bank charter? We used to use salespeople as training. And thank you to all those salespeople who helped me learn banking, because I would just call up and say, we want to set up ATMs, or, we want to issue debit cards. And they'd be like, great. And then start asking me questions, and I had no idea what they were talking about. They slow down, okay, what? And they'd be like, you need this or that. And I'm like, what does that mean?
Every word you don't know, you have to go look up.
Exactly. And learned a lot through the process of just like trying to buy things, which was a lot of fun. And then when we were with time to set up the backend infrastructure, again, never having worked in a bank, there was these configuration manuals that were hundreds of pages long about like how to set this up. And I would just read as much as I could and then go in with the banking vendor, and they would say, do you want this or that? And I'd say, well, what does that mean? What if we do this? What if we do that? And then we just make a decision, even in the face of uncertainty. But you can figure things out if you're dedicated. And again, we had some experienced people involved as well who are helping us get up to speed.
Do you think that might be your superpower, is that you're actually sitting down and you're reading through this ridiculous amount of paper and regulations, and you're doing some of the work that candidly, I don't, even among entrepreneurs, I don't know a lot of people that would be willing to read through some of these things.
I do think the willingness and ability to process lots of information is something that comes naturally to me. I do think it was helpful. My co-founders had, different skills, but that was mine, that I would just like dive into all the details.
And then you're sitting down with the bankers and you might be saying some things that they don't know. You might be bringing up some new topics for them.
Well, it is interesting when you take a approach like that, working from the ground up. I remember being told by an expert, quote unquote, that opening an account fully online without paper wet signatures was illegal. 2001 or something like that. And then we've gotten used to that. But that's the kind of issue that we were dealing with in a fully branchless online bank.
We had a situation where we wanted to issue options to employees, but we felt like because they joined early in lieu of salary oftentimes, and because we were planning on the company growing for a longer period, that even after they left the company, we want to extend that post-termination execution period for them to be able to execute on their options depending on how long they were with the company. And we were explaining to lawyers or experts in that field, employment law, being like, can we do this? And they're like, no, you can't do that. And I'm like, it's just an agreement between the company and the employee. I don't understand why that's not an option. And so I think that there's a lot of things that you can get if you just ask why maybe twice instead of just once.
Well, I think there is a tax advantage if employees exercise sooner.
For sure.
But that becomes the way it's done, and then people forget that it's still a choice.
I think it requires education for the employer to let the employee know that they need to execute within a certain time period, but also means, depending on when they join, they might not have the cash to be able to do that. And at the time, there's now financial vehicles that let you execute on your options sooner, but that wasn't prevalent even like 10 years ago.
I think lawyers are also used to representing the interests of the company in a narrow sense, in a short-term sense, and they don't necessarily see that you are offering this because it's good for the employee, which means it'll be good for the company in a longer-term sense.
Tell me a little bit around that transition. So you were at HireOne. How did you transition out? And then what did that next stage look like for you?
Well, after running a public company for a number of years and having run HireOne for 14, I determined it was time for me to step aside. In fact, I was standing in a venture studio when I decided that. I was looking around me saying, wow, they're having so much fun. And I remember being at the early stages of ideation when I worked at Walker Digital back in 99 to 2000, the group that spun out Priceline. And then I was back standing in a different venture studio 14, 15 years later and thinking, they're having so much fun. I got to do this too. That was what made me decide. And then we announced a transition, a phase out plan, and involved, going part-time for a while. And my co-founder, Mark, stayed on the board. He also transitioned out at a similar time. And we brought in an experienced CEO at that point to take the company forward. And he was able to successfully sell it, which was the final transition, right? Sometimes you think of an IPO as an exit, and it's the beginning of an exit. You get some liquidity, but often you're still very involved in the business as we were running it. And then years later, we sold as a public company, sold the public company for final liquidity. And that's the final exit.
That's a very long journey for Most. I mean, like, I think most startups, you're looking at 3 to 8 years, sometimes 3 to 10. And 14 at that point, a lot of founders are super excited by all these different ideas while they're running this company, but they feel, at least I felt like I would be doing a disservice to the company I was running and to the employees if I was to segment my time and my mental bandwidth to these other ideas. Did you feel the same way when you were running HireOne, that there wasn't enough room for some of these things that you were excited about?
8 years in, I did have that itch and that desire to start another business. So what I did was recruit a team, help raise money, put together the business. I was kind of nights and weekends CFO. This was before I had kids, so I actually had some time.
Yeah.
And I was on the board, so it wasn't deep in another business, but it was something that I was involved with. And then by the time we took HireOne public, it was only board level involvement, nothing, beyond that. But that business, Seeclickfix, was a civic tech SaaS business helping anyone report issues in the public space. Pothole, graffiti.
Oh, wow.
It was at the intersection of, mobile, social, GIS coming online, and was a lot of fun to build that and to see the impact of people's lives. You could make a ticket and maybe you want government to address it, but sometimes the neighbors would gather around and they would address the issue, and seeing that kind of self-organization was pretty exciting.
That's really cool. And also, like, the public good that you can see generated from this is tremendous.
Yeah, we were dedicated to open data so that tickets would be seen by anyone and therefore could foster this sense of collaboration. There were millions of issues reported, could vote on them, discuss. And then governments became paying clients to get more workflow control and routing on the back end. And it was also actually fascinating to see different parts of government routing issues kind of in public. So someone would say, the street light is out here. And it would say, well, this is a state road. And then they would send it over to the state people. You could see all this happening on the public website. I don't know. I thought it was pretty interesting.
Yeah. And then they're like, oh, no, that's county land. And then you're like, what does that have to do with me? I just want to get this light fixed, please. That would be great.
Yeah. But instead of bouncing it back to you, which might have been the more traditional way of handling it, they just routed it on the same platform. And so you could see that it was getting passed to the right place.
I think both of these companies, you guys are selling into a pretty hard market. Like, universities are really hard to get into. Government sector is really hard to get into, each different municipal and county and city office. And so in some ways, you guys targeted a pretty hard markets. How did you guys go to market? How did you guys get in initially?
Well, for HireOne, long sales cycles, up to 18 months, sometimes more. We literally had cases where we won business after doing 2 or 3 different RFPs for the same customer. They would not award it and then do the RFP again the next year. That was unusual. But there were some sales cycles that were truly epic. The reason that we were willing to go through that was because we believed in what we were selling. When we did get a contract, we got great positive feedback from customers, to the point of them saying, this is the best vendor relationship we have with anyone in any category. Really enthusiastic customer relationships with universities. And so that encouraged us to keep going, and those references were really helpful. That's a market where people don't feel like they're competing. Universities generally, despite sports rivalries, aren't in this intense competition that you might expect from the private sector. And so they were very willing to refer good vendors to each other. And that certainly helped drive sales. On the government side, I was actually surprised for this platform, given that the ACVs were usually below the thresholds for RFP or approval from the legislature, like city council. The sales cycles were 3 to 4 months. They weren't as long as you might think. I think part of that, aside from the ticket size, was also because the platform was largely public. While there were some paid features, they could see the essence of it before signing up. And in many cases, the citizens would start to adopt it. So we took an approach of partnering with media properties, and they would highlight Seeclickfix, particular issues. Sometimes they would write articles about, or they would embed the whole map of issues into their website. And I think at the peak, we had 800 media properties using this as content. But that held up a mirror, and government's paying attention to media, and they're seeing, oh, there's this platform, Seeclickfix, people are using. And citizens could opt in, media could opt in before government. And so that helped to raise visibility, credibility, and it helped be a reason why a government would want to get involved.
Miles, you're now working on purpose-built your own venture studio. How many startups are inside this venture studio right now?
We have 6 companies in the venture studio. We've been working on it about 3 years. It's really thrilling to be a co-founder to multiple companies at once. We aren't necessarily starting 6 at the same time, right? It's
Right.
But I love the beginning. I love helping people reach for their dreams. And all of these companies that we're building for scale and purpose, which is a great combination.
Can you tell me about the 6 companies? Maybe give them a shout out?
Yeah, the one that's furthest apart along is called Coral Care. It's in-home specialty care, pediatrics, so OT, speech, physical therapy, not only helping families who need care for their kid, but also unlocking a supply by allowing providers to have a side hustle or to start their own business. It is a supply constrained market. There's just a lot of demand for helping kids who may have developmental delays or other reasons they need to have special care. So the founder there came to us with experience in this market, an idea to do this. She was digital health product leader, had experienced this as a parent. Her sister was a provider. So like in herself was like a picture of this market. And that's something that we're generally looking for with our founders is like, let's work on a problem that the founder knows that there's strong founder market fit. And so Coral Care has gone to raise pre-seed after working with us, and then a $5 million seed with AliCorp leading, and is growing in multiple markets now. So that's one. I don't know if you want that level of detail on all the others, but we can talk about some of the others as well.
Yeah, let's talk about them. I think this is really interesting too, because you're not just sharing like what they do, and you're sharing a little bit around the product market fit side of it, but also why you decided to invest in.
Twill is a company that's a recruiting platform that allows members to earn $5,000, $10,000+ for getting a friend or colleague a job. So employers partner with Twill, they pay, and that part of that money goes in the referral fee, part of that's revenue for Twill. And members can apply, but they're vetted as having experience in their particular field. Right now, the focus is tech, generally sales and engineering, but there are other things as well. And so members has been growing quickly. Clients include Google and startups as well. It's been an exciting, dynamic place. The founder there, she came to us actually with a different idea, and we helped her identify that this was the market she really understood because she'd previously been working in recruiting, previously done sales, and had less tech-enabled, something kind of similar to Twill before, less scaled and without as many members, but she tested this idea and we said, we can add tech to that, add scale, and make this into something really incredible. So they've raised a pre-seed last year with Bloomberg Beta leading, and just had a board call with her this week. Lots of exciting growth and next steps happening there as the technology is starting to get built out.
For your venture studio, are you offering the tech platform? Are you offering to help build out the base for these companies?
So we get hands-on as an institutional co-founder in everything except for building technology. So we're a step really early before people have incorporated, sometimes before they have an idea. Our focus is on de-risking team and demand. So on the team side, we're an instant team around, and we also work together for a while before everyone's committed and before we invest money. So that de-risks what we think is a major problem for early stage startups. Is it's like co-founder shotgun arrangements, when co-founders are working together before they've really thought through things. And we de-risk the team that way, as well as building a quality hiring process and helping recruit the initial team members that lay the foundation for that company. So that's how we de-risk team. On the demand side, we're really focused on finding initial customers, building on some kind of problem that people have real willingness to pay for. This is also, I think, something that founders can make a mistake on and is risky early on, because you may hear some positive feedback from people in your network who don't want to tell you that your idea, doesn't make sense, or you hear what you want to hear and you kind of race towards it. You hear a lot about you got to persevere, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean persevere before you know you're working on the right problem. So we really focus on, can we demonstrate that there's enough demand? We only start the business together with the founder when we have identified customers who say they want the thing and they're willing to pay for it. I'll give an example of something that I don't know how you would categorize it. So Dunbar is another one of our companies that's raised angel, is building software that connects with your various sources of contacts. Could be email, messaging, LinkedIn, could be a list, membership list, and it allows you to search across all of those and then prioritize that search by the closeness or help you figure out intro paths to get there. And it's like, what you hope LinkedIn search would be, except for it can see more than just LinkedIn, right? It sees like, who are you texting with, who are you emailing with, et cetera, who are you having meetings with.
So this is like Dunbar's number. It's like the number of relationships that you can manage, right? Or conceptualize. Is that
exactly? That's the reference. You got it. The idea is that we're connected these days with so many more than 100, 150 people. And how do you keep it all in your mind? You can't. So this is software that helps you for hiring, fundraising, sales, identify who is the person I should be talking about this with and who can introduce me to the right people. We believe that as AI gets more and more sophisticated and people understand how to use it, a lot of marketing channels are going to become really full. And so cold outbound is going to be harder.
How do you see the future of cold outbound changing? Is it almost entirely going to be relationship mapping in your opinion?
I don't know if it's only that, but certainly that's going to be important. And that's part of the thesis behind Dunbar. I do see that there's a potential for an AI arms race. Here's AI reaching out and here's AI sorting through all of the inbox and deciding what is relevant. I mean, you see that to some extent already, right? Like Gmail puts some things in spam and some things in promotions. Like maybe you don't need to see this anytime soon. But I think that's only going to increase and accelerate. One of the things we also have thought about is like, could you find a way to publish what you want? But it's tough to do explicitly. And you could imagine once you have an AI assistant who really is like seeing everything that you're doing, the AI assistant may have a good sense of what you might want. So there's all of these AI like reaching out cold, and then it can sort like the fraction of 1% that you're actually interested in.
So whenever you're looking at current events, you added some stuff on here that I think would be interesting to talk about. So do you want to talk about the Democratic Party getting abundance minded and the rise of cell phone bans in school?
The rise of cell phone bans in schools happened a lot faster than I expected. You've seen a lot of schools banning cell phones during school, which seems like a tangible way to make sure kids aren't on their phone all the time and hopefully making space for learning. When you're spending so much time with a screen, what is not happening, right? What is getting pushed out, I think is the bigger question to me. And I do question whether younger kids need to be on social media. I mean, to me, it seems like that can wait a long time.
It's definitely having an impact. I bought this software and I can look it up, but I think I paid like $50 for a beta that essentially just turns my cell phone into like a smart block. Essentially, like it turns it into a dumb phone. And for me, I thought it was like just the idea was worth it.
So when do you turn it on?
I haven't done it yet. Maybe because I'm too busy watching TikToks. Miles, do you want to talk about the Democratic Party? What were you thinking here?
Oh, I think there's been sort of national talk about Democratic-led cities, in particular San Francisco, where I grew up, has gotten a lot of attention, negative attention for not being properly governed. And I know people have different political views, but to me, it's encouraging when there's a new group who's thinking bigger about, how can we do the things that we want? How can we get more affordable housing, more education, more healthcare, and what they call like supply side liberalism. To me, is exciting to see that faction getting traction, being elected into positions of power within the local Democratic Party.
Can you tell me about supply side liberalism?
It's this idea that you may share the goals of liberals, quote unquote, but a recognition that instead of restricting, we need to be building. Let me give you an example of environmentalism. There's a way of looking at environmentalism that says conservation. What we're trying to do is keep things the same or return them to the way they were, right? Yeah. And there's another version of environmentalism that says the biggest environmental problem is global warming and carbon being emitted, and therefore we need renewable energy, and we're going to have to build different kinds of energy, whether that means solar or for some, nuclear, et cetera. That conservation wing of environmentalism says, no, you can't build anything. We got to keep everything the way it is. Versus this new version of environmentalism says, we got to build, we got to supply, we got to have green energy. We need a lot of energy if we're going to suck the carbon out of the air, right? Negative carbon capture takes a lot of energy. So we build more source of energy. Or density in cities is good. It's actually on a per person basis, uses fewer environmental resources. So we got to build. Right? But there's the conservative conservation side that says, don't build more. I'm just excited to see when there's innovation and a new path being offered that is, as I said, gaining some traction in the city I care about, where I grew up. And I think differs from the narrative that most people are hearing nationally about San Francisco.
Miles, what are some things that make you excited about the future in 2025? What are some things that you're curious about that you really want to either see happen for yourself?
I'm excited to build more companies in 2025, and always look forward to meeting those founders who are going to co-found those companies with us. We specialize in working with solo founders, especially as we think they get a bad rap. And instead of doing co-founder dating, let's go find some customers together.
Miles, where should people go to find you?
I'm on LinkedIn, as I mentioned, and purposebuilt.vc is the website. I've also got a personal Substack if you're interested in my random musings and all the things that I'm reading.
Miles, appreciate the chat.
Well, thanks for having me.
Cheers.
That wraps up today's episode. For more inspiring stories and valuable lessons from successful entrepreneurs, be sure to listen and subscribe wherever you get podcasts. Thanks for listening. Until next time, keep pushing boundaries and writing your next chapter.